So I have 3:31 and I think we're going to get going. Do we have a lot of members? I'm sorry, I'm not able to see everybody right now.
Yeah, I'll take account for you, or somebody else jump in with account. You think you're...
I think we've got 8 members with us. We've got Dr. Wu is in the room. Also, Bill Bauman is here, Dwight Brashear, Fabian, Kari, Michael Espinoza, Park Woodworth, and Sharon Smith are all on the line.
Fabulous. All right, well, maybe we'll give it one more minute since we only have 8.
Well, now that we're waiting, I'll just do a quick shout out to Mr. Brashear. Smart launched their bus on shoulder. I was there for the kickoff event yesterday in Wilsonville. It was a windy time, but we persevered, and it was awesome to be riding on the shoulder. And we weren't lucky enough to have the big congestion traffic, so we could wave at everybody while we were going by. But it was fun and pioneering nonetheless. So it's congrats to him and his team and the others that put that together. That was pretty great.
Thank you, Garrett, for the acknowledgement. And Garrett actually showed up with 2 buses on his shoulder. They were attached to what he was wearing. And so he was very festive, and it kind of set the tone. And it was a party, kind of almost like a Mardi Gras atmosphere there because of what Garrett brought. So no, it was a great event. We had a number of elected officials, transit professionals, community members. It was really, really well attended, and it was cold and breezy out there, but we hung in there. So thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well, you know what? Let's get going, right? Okay. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the Equity and Mobility Advisory Committee for the Oregon Toll Program, which includes the Regional Mobility Pricing Project and the I-205 Toll Project. For myself, Jessica Stanton, and on behalf of ODOT, we appreciate your time and commitment to this process. So let's begin with the centering exercise. We're going to try something a little different today. So before you close your eyes, take your second and third finger in each hand and lightly tap the side of your head near your temples. And then move to your forehead and then the top of your head. And we'll tap 10 times in each location. Okay? Temples, forehead, and top of your head. All right, let's sit up tall and relaxed. Take a deep, full breath in and release, and go ahead and close your eyes or softly gaze downward. Begin tapping lightly at your temples. Move to your forehead. And then the top of your head. And repeat. Temples, forehead, top of your head. Go ahead and lower your hands and gently roll your shoulders back. And take one more deep breath in and release it fully. And slowly open your eyes. Welcome back. Thank you again to everyone who is here. We truly appreciate your time and contributions to this process. Next slide, please. So when it comes to technical help, Nick is the person to go to. Please note his phone number and his email just in case you need it later. We will be recording the entire meeting. What you say here is part of the public record. The recording will be made available for public review next week. To find more information about the project, please go to OregonTolling.org. Community members, You are welcome to email your public comments to us at OregonTolling@odot.state.or.us. Please add committee public comment in the subject line. As we meet today, let's remind ourselves of the Equity and Mobility Advisory Committee Working Together agreements from Emac's charter. Listen, believe, and reflect. Accept non-closure for the moment. Speak your own truth with compassion. Listen to understand, don't listen to respond. Value and celebrate each other's experiences. Open hearts plus open minds lead to exploration of possibilities. Make space, then take space and be concise. Bring your best thinking into the room. Attack the problem, not the person. Disagreement, frustration, and differences of opinion are acknowledged, explored, and addressed. So the proposed outcomes for our meeting today include, most importantly, we'll focus on Emac and ODOT finding agreement on the foundational statements as our next step in building recommendations to advance equity. We'll prepare for the Oregon Transportation Commission meeting on November 18. We'll discuss the December Emac meeting, and then we'll provide an update on the toll projects and upcoming engagement opportunities. Now, our proposed meeting outcomes, let's look at what our agenda topics are today. Today's meal, the main focus of our meeting, are the foundational statements. The Oregon Transportation Commission meeting on November 18, the December Emac meeting, and a toll projects and engagement update, and then we'll close. So today's meal, or main course, is our discussion about the foundational statements. Let's briefly reflect on where we've been and where we've headed with the Emac game plan. In April and May of this year, the focus was on the transit and multimodal policy strategy bucket. Then in June and July, we pivoted to neighborhood health and safety impacts. In August, we took a deep dive into affordability. Now we're here in the September through November milestone of the Emac game plan. So today, during this meeting in October, we continue to prepare the committee and ODOT for Emac's delivery of equitable strategy and policy recommendations for the Oregon Transportation Commission. Earlier this month, we met and talked with the committee about taking a revised approach to delivering the committee's recommendations to the Oregon Transportation Commission. During those conversations, we talked about the Emac OTC discussion in November, centering on Emac foundational statements. So with the support, input, and guidance from the navigators, this committee sub-team, we developed foundational statements. Number one, we believe the partnership, back to the other slide, thank you. We believe the partnership on the foundational statements between ODOT, Emac, and the Oregon Transportation Commission will serve as a building block for the Emac Foundation recommendations that will follow. Secondly, more time is needed to bring the information that Emac and ODOT require to fully form the recommendations. Information like toll rates, revenues, analysis of benefits and impacts, and community feedback to support the comprehensive development of the recommendations. And now I'll pass it over to Garrett.
Definitely. So I'll start by just walking us through kind of where we've been and what we've committed to now, which is really written down in the important grounding section, that first page of the foundational statements document. And it talks about ODOT, the OTCs, and with Emac, you're helping us craft that language around the historic and current impacts and disinvestment of transportation and the history that has in the state and in the Portland metro region. We have the Emac charter, which identified those key areas that the OTC needed Emac's feedback on. And that was, how do we equitably do tolling with investments in transportation options and transit, the impacts to diversion and neighborhood health and safety, and affordability. The equity framework is also listed there, and it kind of identifies that was in May. That's when you all went before the OTC, and we kind of had a moment where we talked about and kind of agreed to that is the document that's leading the development of the toll program. Also that reference and how we're changing our way we're doing work with the trauma-informed approach. And then really this, I don't know if this has been written down previously or in the charter or the framework or where in other places, but we just hear over and over again with working with you all in the community that this work has to be done with the context and understanding of the climate crisis that we are in now, the widening wealth gap that we see, the existing health disparities that are in our communities, and how housing and the cost of that has reshaped the region. So I know we're talking about transportation and transportation project, but I think this first landing page does a great job of setting the context and the awareness of where we're at. Next slide. And so I think we're going to transition it to Chris and Jessica, who are going to walk us through, and what you'll see here on the screen are some of the red line, some of the edits that have been made just in the last couple of days from the statements that were sent out. Chris, I think you're taking the first one.
Yeah, and I just want to acknowledge and thank the Emac Navigator subcommittee team in particular for helping to bring these foundational statements to the rest of the group, to the committee today, and really kind of fleshing this out. So the first one is provide enough investment to ensure that reliable emission reducing and a competitive range of transportation options. Sorry. Are provided to advance climate, safety, and mobility goals and prioritize benefits to equity framework communities. Garrett, is that correct? How I read that off?
Yeah, that's correct. And I guess I forgot to say also in setting this up, these are statements that Emac has been crafting through the navigators, but it's also we've worked with Commissioner Smith and then the ODOT leadership team. And we feel like that the way that it was written and then these edits proposed are things that we can all come to support and agreement on. And so that's where we're working towards, is that question that Jessica is going to call at the end of this, is that if you all are also in that 80 to 100% bucket with the edits that we see here on the screen. So yeah, Chris, the way you read that was exactly right, okay, as far as what's revised.
Okay, next statement. Climate and equity needs are connected and solutions must be developed to address both at the same time. So the change there, by the way, is going from should to must. There must be toll-free travel options available to avoid further burdening people experiencing low incomes who are struggling to meet basic needs, including food, shelter, healthcare, and so on and so forth. And to the greatest degree possible, investments that are necessary to advance equity should be delivered at the same time as highway investments and be in place on day one of tolling or before. Additional work needs to be completed to identify these investments. I'll take a pause there. I'm going to transition over to Jessica, but before we do, Garrett, was there anything that you wanted to elaborate on in terms of the text or any of these statements?
No, in this one, I think when you read it, you read the should part. The must part is the language that we're carrying forward. So yeah, that was an edit from one of the folks. So, yeah.
Okay.
Nope, that's all. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Great. So foundational statement number 5, tolling must be a user-friendly system that is clear and easy to use by people of all backgrounds and abilities, including linguistic diversity and those without internet access. And foundational statement number 6, benefits that are offered in Oregon must extend into Southwest Washington. Foundational statement number 7, although the toll projects will have a statewide impact, they must be developed in coordination with regional partners to build an equitable and successful transportation system together.
And so the last section of this document really are areas where we are called out that we're going to pay attention to going forward. And these are things I think we were, a lot of it was already planning to do, but this helps just give some further articulation and direction. So if there are items that you did not see on this list that are very important to you to get you kind of into that 80 to 100% kind of I can support where this is at now, this is the area where we would preferably have them located, because these are things we need to work on more. And so as you can see here on the screen, those options around where and should we dedicate toll revenue to specific sources? What's the enforcement system from fines or oversight? What are the commitments from the OTC? When will they weigh in? For those items that are needed to advance equity, where do we need to have partnerships, specifically if we're thinking around like increased or new transit service? That's going to need to be a partnership that ODOT does, or if there are services ODOT doesn't offer today. The continued application of the equity framework as we're developing these toll projects in this program, data collection and security, and the concerns about what data is being collected and when it's being shared. And then what kind of in addition to what we're doing here with the Oregon Toll Program, the Portland region is about to start a update of their regional transportation plan and transportation policies. And that very same thing is also going at the state level. So within the next couple of years, there's some real opportunities for commitments at a public policy level, even outside of tolling, for commitments to be made. And so those are items that we've identified as kind of on the radar and that we want to continue to work towards. And then I'll just finally say here before we get to the question is that in looking at those next steps and the timelines on when we're going to receive information, with ODOT, we're really committed to having an Emac and equity committee through 2024. And so we'll continue to talk with you all about if it's the same group of people, do we bring new people on, do we expand the committee to pick up some representation that we don't currently have now. I know we've talked before about people with a disability or tribal governments. These are things that we'll continue to explore. So know that is an ODOT commitment that we're making to extend that through 2024 so we can make sure we get the information for these next steps and continue to work with you all because you've been such an awesome resource in helping us to date. Next slide.
Great. Thank you, Garrett and Chris, for reviewing the foundational statements with all of us. So here's the question. Before we start the conversation, let's take a quick pulse poll. Are you, as Emac members, in the 80% to 100% range in support of these foundational statements, yes or no? So Nick, if you can go ahead and pull up that poll.
Yeah, happy to do that. And we do have a hand raised as well. Michael
Oh, we
Espinosa. We do.
Okay, Michael. Is it a question that we can address during our discussion, or do you want to have ask the question before we take the poll?
Well, I was going to just propose a slight change in addition to the foundational statement. So is this the right time to discuss that?
How about if we take the poll right now and then we can take a deep dive into your proposed change?
Okay.
Does that work?
That sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So everybody,
oh, Jessica, you muted yourself real quick.
My apologies. So let's go ahead and pull up that poll, Nick. And everybody just give your right answer right now today. The foundational statements as written, is Emac in the 80% to 100% range to support these foundational statements? And as implied in the question, we're only inviting committee members to answer the question, and we appreciate everyone's consideration of that. And if there are any members that are phoning in right now, please go ahead and unmute yourself and let us know what your vote is so one of the project team members may cast it for you. So one more time, is Emac in the 80% to 100% range to support these foundational statements, yes or no? All right, let's go ahead and wrap up that poll. Check out the results. Okay, so 77% of you say yes, and 23% say no. Great. Okay, so without further ado, it sounds like, Michael, you are the first person that would like to introduce a change. The floor is yours.
Thank you. It's good to see you all. So I think one element that is missing for me in the foundational statements is sort of an acknowledgement of the status quo, and the opportunity of pricing or tolling can help reduce vehicle miles traveled. And I know that's a wonky term, and we talked about it in some of our navigator meetings, but it's just something that I hear really strongly from our pricing options for equitable mobility committee that has met at the City of Portland, and they put together their recommendations around pricing to City Council. And a big piece of their discussion in what makes, an equitable pricing system or tolling system is the role that tolling can play in demand management or, reducing vehicle trips on the system. And I think that, leads into a lot of outcomes, including, reduced emissions, which I think is great that makes another appearance in the foundational statements. And it's also, the element of revenue reinvestment into a truly multimodal system that makes an appearance in the foundational statements. So that is all, really great to see. But I think without explicitly calling out that tolling is a tool that can really, influence the way that our system is functioning and, reducing vehicle miles traveled, that's like a key piece that, that committee, that it was a equity focused community task force, that really had deep discussions. And that was one of the main things that came out of that. And so that's why I'm advocating. So what I'm proposing is, we add in just another foundational statement that acknowledges that I think this is an opportunity to use tolling as a pricing mechanism to really reduce vehicle miles traveled, and then have all of the benefits of that system in resetting our status quo, and really acknowledging that, that is done, I think in lockstep with exemptions for low income folks. And, we get benefits across the system and make our system more efficient. So I'll stop there. But in short, what I'm proposing is we add a foundational statement line focused on reducing vehicle miles traveled. I'd love to hear what others think.
Me as well. Thank you so much, Michael. That was awesome. So what do other people think about that, adding an additional foundational statement that is directed at reducing vehicle miles traveled? Do we have any? And Emily, you know what, can we take down the PowerPoint for the moment so we can see everyone's faces on screen?
Looks like Dr. Phil Wu has his hand up. Jessica.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks very much, Jessica and Chris. I fundamentally agree with that whole idea. However, just for clarification, isn't there a preamble to these foundational statements? Somewhere in my memory at the Navigators meeting, I thought we had talked about the preamble including some language which was pretty specific to this issue about connecting, the work of the tolling with climate impacts and VMT. And so correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I thought there was some element of that in the preamble. Now, whether or not that that should be pulled out and then made into its own foundational statement is certainly something that we can talk about here and now. But I just wanted some clarification about that initial impression.
Garrett, you are right, Phil. And Garrett, I think, do you want to speak to this? Because we've had multiple conversations about how we wanted to handle this.
Yeah, I think, and I threw the link to the foundational statements in the chat if folks want to bring that up and look at it. Dr. Wu, I think we used the language around accounting for the climate crisis, referencing that piece of it in the preamble of it. But I don't think we used the, like, for example, e.g., i.e., whatever, VMT reduction piece. And I think one of the pieces was around it was, and we saw this, I think in James was talking as well around, how can we do this equitably? Because the one way, the quickest way you reduce vehicle miles traveled is just by having a really high toll rate. But we know that can have real implications on the other side. So again, this is something I think when it comes to some of the outcomes that we really want to get to, reducing emissions, better air quality, addressing heat islands, it is something I see a clear path on. But the how we get there piece of it, vehicle miles traveled, transportation demand management, I think is a little more, in this point, a little more malleable. And so that's where I could see it in a preamble or in the next steps. But that's why there's some questions from the ODOT side around kind of including that and calling that out explicitly as a foundational statement.
And Michael's comments are similar to what I've suggested, that tolling should be a part of a reinvigorated traffic demand management program, because it accomplishes the same thing as the higher goals and can keep the tolls being lower.
Thank you for that. Why don't I go to James next, and then Michael and Phil, and then I saw Abe.
Thanks. Yeah, well, to that point, I look at the reducing the vehicle miles traveled. That's a measure in my mind of an outcome that we're trying to get. And if we're saying the outcome that we're trying to get is reduced emissions and all that sort of thing, the reduced vehicle miles travel, I think, is a measure of the effectiveness of the actions that we're taking. But the point that I want to drive is what we're tasked to do is look for equitableness. And so if a measure is reduced vehicle miles traveled, the equity piece would be that impact isn't falling on low income or people who have greater challenges on the tolling system. So I agree with the concept or the measure, but the measure needs to have some level of an equity focus to it. That was my point with it.
Thank you for that, James. I think we were going to sorry, back to Michael then. Would you like to respond to that?
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. I think part of what I'm trying to balance is like to the points about like what is it that the outcomes that we want to see. I think those are all valid, but I think how we get there is by reducing our vehicle miles traveled as an objective, as a key thing. I think that by calling out like emissions, or safety, like I think we're just kind of like not being transparent then about what it is we're trying to do, and that's where I feel like to be clear, what we're trying to do is reduce vehicle trips that are on the system, and so I think to do that equitably, that means that we're being really thoughtful and like doing so equitably. So that's where like all of the discussions we've had, I think, in work and like laying out how can we do this equitably come into play, right? To make sure that we're not causing harm, to populations that have been harmed before, I think it's really about recognizing that the status quo of the current system like really isn't working. And so what levers do we have to help encourage that? And, to the points that Park brought up too, I think like TDM or transportation demand management and, offering like incentives or, other pieces is an important piece of a holistic transportation system. But I think what we're finding is that price signal is a really powerful tool in shaping behavior. And so I think all of it works together. But I guess I'm here sharing that I think it's just really, I think it's important to lay it out clearly that I think one of the main opportunities for pricing and tolling specifically is to have the vehicle miles traveled.
And sorry, Phil, and then Abe.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I wonder if I absolutely agree with everything that's been said, especially from Michael about the importance and the central role of VMT. I wonder if there is, and I guess I'll just sort of be blunt about it, if there is political correctness or incorrectness in using the term VMT. I mean, I'm just wondering if there is some overlay to that makes it difficult to actually use that term, because it is very specific to wanting to reduce automobile travel or single occupancy automobile travel. And that may hit some people the wrong way. And I'm wondering if there is a certain element of that in the room, sort of like the elephant in the room, maybe we should sort of be transparent and honest about that if that's the case.
That's a great question, Phil. Let me go to Abe, and then we'll try to land this conversation around VMT.
Find the unmute button. Again, this is good conversation. Feels a hard act to follow. Got me thinking about big picture stuff there. But I guess a couple of random thoughts that have accumulated throughout this conversation is, one, for me, the conversation around VMT needs to be paired with providing functional alternatives to driving. And so I think that's a really important part of, if we do add language around that. I know we have some components around competitive transportation options, but I think there's a line between competitive and functional, and something that meets somebody where they're at that needs to travel regionally throughout our area. And if a car option is taken away from them, what alternatives exist that are there to fill that gap? So I think those two need to go hand in hand. And then kind of stepping back and looking at and maybe that functional transportation option gets at some of that alternative language. And then I think my other thought was on the foundational statements overall. A piece that's missing for me in those, as I was looking over the slide deck for today, is just the continual concern around diversion from the toll program. And we do have some language in our foundational statements around evaluating the health and safety impacts of that, and so it'll be captured in our further assessment work down the line. But I think on the note of transparency and making sure we're still continuing to think about that as we understand what the NEPA mitigations are related to diversion, and then figuring out how we can enhance them, build them, complement them in with our equity lens to the work that we're bringing. Because I guess kind of bridging those two things, VMT or congestion pricing and reducing VMT is a behavior driver, is something designed to change behavior, but is it changing the behavior that we want and causing people to shift modes versus taking an alternative route to avoid tolls? So I think there's some interconnectedness between those concepts.
So Abe, if you're proposing an amendment that's to add in language that's a little bit more direct about addressing diversion, and then possibly interconnecting it with wherever we're going to go with VMT, and offering pairing VMT with options for additional options. If people are being told they have to reduce their travel with vehicles, then we're also presenting options. I'm trying to just get a sense of how to articulate an amendment that it sounds like you're proposing.
Yeah, I don't know if that's the articulation that I had in my mind, but I also don't know if I can like provide a distinct sentence to help get that in the foundational statement. I think definitely just citing diversion in the foundational statements at some point. I think that's probably better suited maybe in like the next steps component to make sure that we'll cover it there.
Okay.
As far as tying it to our other topics, I'm not sure the best way to go about doing that, and would definitely be interested in what others think in the group.
Okay, great. And I think I saw Chris's hand, and then Garrett, and then Michael. So go, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I'm hearing is, if I can kind of consolidate the comments, I think part of what I heard, I think Michael trying to get to is kind of a philosophical approach of leveraging tolling instead of increasing the number of cars on the road, using an approach and strategies that reduce the number of cars on the road, and having that be the driver. And what I heard from Abe was, and let's make sure that we're actually reducing the number of cars on the road and not just diverting into other communities. So I think there's a way to be able to explain that in a way that doesn't use VMT, as I think Dr. Wu was calling out, in some of those more technical terms, and just putting it in kind of a little bit more real speak, which I know is something that the committee really likes. But with that, I'll hand it over to Garrett for any other thoughts.
Yeah, I'll just be quick. So I put into the chat, because remember, the foundational statements aren't our only place to get ODOT commitments. And so when we were going through the performance measures, one of our goals for the I-205 toll project, and this is also language proposed for the regional toll project, is to support travel demand management. And the objective would be to design a toll system to improve efficient use of roadway infrastructure and improve travel reliability. And so we'll be measuring specifically change in vehicle miles traveled in the study area for the freeway and non-freeway travel. So I'm wondering, with that commitment, I'm just wondering, like, where do we need the duplication in language? If we do, could it does it look similar? So I just put that there for people to ponder. And then just one suggestion, if we are proposing amendments, I think it helps if people can formulate that and put some language in the chat. That can at least help us all kind of more land it on when we're thinking about it. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
And that's a great point, Garrett. And even if you can't articulate the amendment, just go ahead and drop in the main core of it. Like, like Abe, you'd put diversion, and Michael, you'd put VMT, and what have you. That'd be super helpful. So now we'll go to Michael.
Thank you. Abe, I really appreciate your point, because I think that VMT and diversion are so linked together. So I think they could go together in a foundational statement. But really, I think when I say reducing VMT, that is not just for the highway system, that would be for the whole transportation as a whole. So local roads as well. And I think, I agree, diversion is one of our big concerns here. So I think, for tolling to be successful, it would really be helping to reduce the, just the amount of trips that are happening by vehicles on the entire system. So I just wanted to air that a little bit more. I think there were threads of that that Garrett and Chris were also saying. So maybe there's a way that those can be put together and addressed.
So that sounds like that could be an aspirational, because if you're talking about VMT for the overall system, and maybe we want to put that in the preamble, like we've been talking about, but in a way that would work for all parties, for the committee as well as for ODOT. But I'm just going to put that out there for now. I see Phil's hand. Go, Phil.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I like the way Chris formulated sort of that combination of concepts. Actually, I think I like what everyone has said. And I think the bottom line is that we don't necessarily want to get hung up on specific words like VMT as long as what that effectively means for climate mitigation is a reduction in vehicle miles traveled, taking into account the availability of alternate forms of transportation, taking into account the fact that there's going to be diversion. So if all of those interconnected elements are accounted for, then essentially we've achieved what just saying we want to reduce VMT so that the climate's improved, what that would result in.
Excellent. Park? I'm sorry, Park, I'm not sure if are you unmuted?
I wanted to make a comment about benefits that are offered in Oregon must extend into Southwest Washington. Grammatically speaking, that could be interpreted that every benefit must extend, and I don't think that's logical or what we intended. So I don't know that there needs to be any amendments, but I just kind of wanted it on the record that there must be benefits extending into Washington, but that's not the interpretation that every individual benefit would have to.
Well said. So I want to make sure we're kind of halfway through our discussion, that we've addressed all the people that said no. And if you had any other thoughts. So we've heard from Michael and from Abe, and we're kind of considering what those amendments may or may not be. But are there any other people that feel like we're not in the 80 to 100% range with the foundational statements? I'm not seeing any hands.
So put another way, is that the main, what is that sort of the main concern for those of you that stated that we're not in that 80 to 100% range is sort of that climate VMT concern, or is there something else that's holding us back there?
Good comment. Go ahead, James.
Well, I voted no because I wanted to have the discussion before I voted, because I wanted to hear what other people had to say and get it all out before voting. And as it pertains to this whole VMT talk and all that, I think, Chris, you started some much better language than I was putting in. And I think that we need to have some language in there that talks to the reduction of VMT and the emissions with having a limited impact as far as diversion goes. And I think putting it into kind of real speak, I mean, we can have all that technical speak at the beginning that Garrett loves so much. But I'm just saying, because the reality is we're creating stuff here that potentially other people are going to have to interpret and move forward. And so the more clarity on really what we mean that we're able to put in there, I think is going to add clarity. And I think that's where we have the greatest advantage, is in kind of the foundational body pieces, getting what we want it to say so we can then move that forward. And so with that, I would change my vote from no to yes.
Okay. So
it sounds like, Michael, you had dropped some text in there on chat box. Was there anything that you wanted to put forth, typically beyond what's in there? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll give voice that I was just expressing support for the proposed language by James and Chris. I think like those are both worded in a way that gets at vehicle miles reduction, and also I think it explains a little bit about like the why and a little bit about the how. So just voicing support that I think it just feels like such a foundational thing to me that it would be like a loss, like something would be missing if it's not put forth here in the foundational statements, because I think like James is saying, like if somebody is reading this and interpreting it, like they'll go to this first before any of our future materials. And so if they're trying to take some high level takeaways, like I think that is an important one for a successful tolling program.
Great. So what I'm hearing is that it sounds like we need to make some kind of an amendment or some kind of a change that addresses VMT, but in a way, to James's point, tolling, I'm going to read it out loud. Tolling needs to support VMT reduction while not increasing diversion nor increasing heavy impact on low-income people, something like that. So, and Garrett, did you want to share a thought about this before I finish?
No. Keep going. I do want to say something.
Okay.
Well, maybe I'll just jump in now.
Okay,
So
jump.
between the statement that James wrote and Chris wrote, I think we're within that realm of some of those key elements. I am going to call up my friend Lucinda here to see. I think this is within the realm we can work with from an ODOT standpoint. I guess kind of voicing from before, but Lucinda, I want you to share your thoughts on any direction for us to work on.
Can you see me? I can't
Yes, we
see
can
myself.
see
I can't see myself. Isn't that scary? So I hear the conversation that's going on. I like the piece about making sure we don't impact low income or people who are car dependent. So if we're saying we're putting everyone out their cars, then there are a lot of things to do. And technically, is there a time convenience to taking transit or some other way for people to get there who are car dependent? I don't think that the tenets of our program are literally pushing people out of their vehicles. We're saying just a small shift will even help. So if you choose to go another time of day, that's helpful. If you choose not to take that trip that day, that's helpful. It's really about that timing. That's the ideal of variable pricing and peak pricing. So that way we can kind of get in those margins. I think that VMT is a measure we will be looking at as we go forward. I'm not sure what that means yet because we don't have that yet designed, exactly what that measure would be to say, yeah, you meet it, no, you don't. And I think that is very broad. So I am, that's where I am. That's where I am.
Thank you, Lucinda. Sharon, I see that you'd like to make a comment.
Yes, thank you. I definitely agree that we want to make sure that we aren't diverting the local roads. From my perspective, I think our goals for tolling are focused more on that congestion reduction and time shifting, as well as on raising money to invest in the system, and also particularly in non-highway investments, transit, multimodal. So to me, VMT isn't the primary goal. VMT reduction isn't the primary goal, but really more focused on congestion management and funding, and that one of the possibilities is that we will see a reduction in VMT, but that's not, to me, that's not the reason we're doing tolling. That's just my 2 cents.
Okay, I see Michael and then Park.
Thanks for sharing all those comments. And I think, Commissioner Smith, with your congestion management and funding, I think those, go go hand in hand with our opportunity to address the climate crisis. So I think that's the other strong element that I'm feeling that this has the opportunity to address. And of course, like there's a lot of factors that go into that, but I think it's an important piece because of just the large impact that transportation has and the emissions from the sector. So I think, by using this moment to be really strategic about how we set up tolling, I guess to me still brings me back to reducing vehicle miles traveled, across the system. So that's for, the highway system, the local roadway system, making sure that we're not just pushing down trips in one area onto like local roads, or that we're not also just shifting from peak demand periods to off peak. Like, I think those nuances are really important to help, congestion or like traffic flow. But like, I think overall, I think this is an opportunity to also, address the climate. And for me, like that is so tightly linked to equity and who is bearing the burden of climate change and who has the resources to adapt and change to a changing climate. Like, I think, quick example, like, I think back to the time when we had, so many fires in Oregon that it was difficult to breathe. There was, ash in the air. And so those high pollutants, like, you have to, for people to adapt to that, you have to have the funds to, get good air filters or to be able to not go into work or not go work outside. And so I feel like that is just so weaved for me, like equity and climate change are so weaved together. And so that's where I really feel like this has to, address that as well as much as it can. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And okay, let's go with Park. And then I think I saw Fabienne's hand.
I just want to go after that elephant in the room that was mentioned before for transportation demand management. Getting people to walk, getting people to bicycle, getting people to use the bus, carpooling, van pooling, all of those things have been shown to be very helpful for people and the businesses that can have smaller parking lots. So it is not negative to push and encourage people into those directions, given that their trip is logical for those particular methods.
Thank you, Park. And Fabienne?
Yeah, I just wanted a little bit more of like what Michael was sharing. And I think that, if we do want to have these equitable outcomes, we are going to need to create this transportation system, right, that does bring greater opportunities for like low-income folks and other marginalized groups. So I think that, and like, Michael mentioned, it does go hand in hand with, climate and equity. So making sure that, we do reinvest, different solutions, transportation solutions. So folks in those areas aren't, affected by diversion. So I was wondering if maybe we could include some of that language that Michael was proposing in the foundational statement number 2, since we already kind of talk about climate and equity.
Okay. So foundational statement number 2 is climate and equity needs are connected and solutions must be developed to address them at both at the same time. Sorry, let me read that again. Climate and equity needs are connected and solutions must be developed to address both at the same time. So you're proposing, Fabienne, that we add some of the additional language that kind of details more what this means. Is that what you're proposing based on what Michael had said?
Yes, that's just an idea recommendation. I'm not sure what others think.
Go ahead.
Well, a friendly amendment to my friend Michael there. Could we do so building on that, further work needs to be done to understand how a reduction of vehicle miles traveled could meet our, trying to connect it then to our goals. So to meet our goals of addressing climate change, concerns about diversion and its impacts on neighborhood health and safety, and impacts to affordability, which is low income people, commuters and businesses and residents, something like that.
I've got some language here for you guys to chew on. So I think the last proposal by Fabian was saying to kind of tie it on to number 2. So what I have is climate and equity needs are connected and solutions must be developed both at the same time. In order to do this, further work needs to be done to support both congestion management and vehicle miles traveled reduction, with an emphasis on increasing functional alternatives to driving, while not increasing diversion or heavily impacting low-income car-dependent people. And I'll drop that into the chat box.
How are people feeling about that amendment? Let's have a thumbs up if you're for that amendment. Okay. I'm seeing people come and go. So one more time, thumbs up, and just keep them up for a second so I can take a count. I'm not seeing Amanda or Izzy. Okay, great. Fabienne, how about you? Diana, are you a thumbs up? You can just call it out if you're not on screen.
I'm a thumbs up. This is Amanda. Sorry, I just had to repeat it.
Thank you. Okay, great. So I think we've got an amendment that covers a lot of everything that we talked about. How about you, Abe? How's that amendment for you? Do we need to also add an amendment about or something specifically that says diversion?
Well, I think we have that in there. I guess I would just emphasize, I guess for me, the VMT discussion, like showing up in this space now, it's deficit based, and the conversation inherently is taking something away from somebody, which does meet resistance. And so I guess I would maybe suggest starting with increasing functional alternatives to driving, and I think that could, and then pairing that with VMT, I think that helps our priorities as well with focusing on creating those alternatives and other functional systems. Because I'm not sure it's equitable to focus on reducing VMT and create a system designed for that, and then not have any alternatives available that work and meet people's lives where they're at. So I think if we focus on the latter, on the functional transportation systems, that where it is safe and realistic for people to walk, bike, and take the bus, and have that a continual goal, then VMT will follow.
Yeah, and I think Abe, that's how kind of like we were trying to position foundational statement number 1 was to speak to that there need to be these alternatives in place, and it can't be that they're just like offered, but that I think it was Kari's suggestion to have the ensure enough investment to do it, I think, to make sure. And I think you had even mentioned before, like competitive, functional. That my interest is in getting in that same piece as well. So if we don't reorder this statement, it is hopefully captured and articulated in the first statement as well. To it.
Does that work for you, Abe?
Yeah, I still gave a thumbs up.
Okay. Well, great. Well, I think we're pretty much near the end of our discussion time, but what I'd like to do is see where we're at with the foundational statements, if we're closer. Now, if we add this amendment that's in somewhat of the language that Chris has proposed and what everybody seems to agree to, and if there's anything else that we need to do more around some of the concept of functional transportation and increasing that, with those two ideas, if we amend the foundational statements, let's take another vote. So the proper polling question is, considering the proposed amendments that we just described, is Emac in the 80% to 100% range to support these foundational statements? And let's go ahead and take another poll and let us know yes or no with the amendments that we've talked about. Are we in the 80% to 100% range to support these foundational statements? So go ahead and answer yes or no. All right. And hopefully we've given you enough time to give your answer. Well, let's go ahead and wrap up the poll. Okay, we moved 3%, 80% say yes, and 20% still say no. You know what? Let's just take 5 more minutes and hear from those people that are saying no, so we can just clarify and let's better understand what we would need to do to get you all in that 80 to 100% range. So those of you that said no, if you can go ahead, raise your hand, just let us know. I'm not seeing any raised hands. I'm missing, who said no?
I wonder, are you able to pull up in the meeting? It might have been somebody from outside. Maybe it's a member of the public also, because we can't fully lock it down to where it's just Emac members.
Okay. Maybe so.
But I don't know if Nick can pull that up on the fly or not to see.
Can you tell Nick?
I will need to do that after the meeting ends to run the report.
Okay. Well, so members, if there's anyone that said no that has something to talk about, please let us know. I'm not seeing any hands. I think we're all on board then right now with the amendments.
Commissioner Smith said if somebody doesn't vote, is it counted a no? I think if you just clicked X or didn't vote at all, then it didn't count it as a no. It should just go through as a yes. So, yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I think we might have something to celebrate. I think you guys, I think we did it. Bravo to this amazing committee that, we put together. Yeah, right. Give yourself a hand. You have foundational statements. All right, we'll get back to you with those changes. Awesome. Anyway, that was amazing. Let's go on with the rest of our program. Emily, I think we're on, there you go. The Oregon Transportation Commission meeting on November 18. Let's just talk briefly about what that is. So, sorry. Sorry, I'm having a little bit of screen problem here. Give me one moment. So this slide represents the OTC's charge to Emac, which can be summarized as providing feedback on how to address multimodal transportation options, neighborhood health and safety impacts, and affordability to advance equity through the toll program and equitable projects. Public engagement and process equity are also part of Emac's charge. Next slide. So Emac members will talk about their work since May 2021, which is the last time that Emac talked to the OCC. And of course, also Emac members will present the foundational statements during this meeting. And then ODOT will present their plan to support further work on the recommendations. So these are the main pillars of the November 18th meeting between Emac and OTC. Next slide. During the November meeting, Emac will be specifically requesting and anticipating a response for these two things. For the OTC to weigh in and join Emac and ODOT in support of the foundational statements, to find common ground and alignment on the foundational statements. Secondly, the OTC will provide direction to ODOT or plan for support for further work on the Emac recommendations. So right now, if we can just pull everybody back up on screen, does anyone have any questions about what these next steps are for the November 18 meeting with the OTC?
What time is the meeting? I tried to research that and it wasn't clear.
I knew you were going to ask that question. I'm going to defer to Sharon on that.
Well, we usually get the agenda the week before, so I don't know exactly when on the agenda this is going to be. We usually start somewhere around 9 in the morning and go till about 2 or 3. So I apologize that I can't give you a better time frame than that. If there's a need to know more than a week in advance, let me know and I will talk with our folks and see if we can't kind of narrow down that time frame for this discussion.
And
yeah,
I think
we'll support you, Commissioner Smith, on that. Yeah, we'll work with the ODOT team that does the scheduling for the meetings and try to get that out as early as we can to you all.
Yeah, and is there a time of day that doesn't work for people? That would be helpful to know.
We'll find out, and we'll coordinate
this group. For this group, is there a time for this group?
Do you guys have a preference for a time of day for the meeting?
This time is fine. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, for me, I think later in the afternoon is better for me because like right in the middle of the day can be challenging sometimes.
Yeah, I would say later in the afternoon for me too would be better.
I concur. This is Diana. Later in the afternoon for me, and I was driving back into town, so I've been listening on the phone all the way, and finally got in front of my computer. And I just want to recognize the great discussion and Michael's comments. Spot on. Thank you, Michael, for sharing your thoughts and bringing forth those recommendations.
Thank you, Diana. Okay, so Commissioner, it does sound like later in the afternoon would be better for this group.
I'm not sure how late this meeting is going to go, but what we can do is just say it'd be better to have it towards the end of the day, if it's possible.
Perfect.
I mean, towards the end of the meeting.
Okay. Which would maybe be in the 2 to 3 o'clock range?
Yeah, I just don't know. It really depends upon what all is on the agenda. I mean, sometimes we're done at 2 or 3, and sometimes we're down to 4 or 5. I just don't know.
Okay, great. Members, any more questions about the November 18th meeting? I'm seeing no hands. Okay, great. Let's go ahead and move on. So now we'll go for it, Garrett.
Oh, no, sorry, Jessica. Well, one, I love the new centering exercise, Jessica. That was great to start off the meeting. Thank you. And I agree, that was an excellent discussion we just walked through. But I'll walk through a longer version of the presentation we'll give to the OTC on November 18th. But I'll provide some more details for you all on kind of ODOT's plan for support. This has been a document we've been providing the last couple of Emac meetings, and it kind of rolls out on a lot of these big questions. How is the information that ODOT can we bring to you all to help move your recommendations forward? Next slide. So when we look at toll rates and revenues, there's really 3 different levels or stages that you'll see throughout the process. There's the early estimations that were done for the value pricing feasibility analysis in 2018. There's the assumptions that are made to inform the NEPA, or the environmental review process analysis. For the I-205 toll project, those numbers are really packaged up and released out with the draft environmental assessment, which we're looking at late spring of next year. The reason why we kind of don't share those or wait to have that information and document to share is because a lot of times as you're doing these environmental studies and analysis, your toll rate will actually change because you're trying to adjust the dials to better manage congestion, to avoid diversion, to meet those goals that we see throughout the process. So to avoid from releasing different numbers at different times, we really are going to plan to wait to have that draft document to then present that out. That document will be your first look at kind of where ODOT's commitments on mitigation as well in these projects. So back to the slide, that's mid-2022 for the I-205 toll project. And then for the regional mobility pricing project, this is mid-2023. Now the investment grade, this is that final kind of 6 months or very close to before the toll rates are set themselves. There's this final kind of toll rate analysis, and it can sometimes even be on a range of toll rates can be adopted. And that is done, and that's kind of a third round of toll rates and revenue analysis that it's done there. And that's where when you get to those final commitments on how much will go towards certain highway projects or transit or multimodal investments or other things, a lot of that gets finalized in that final 6 months before the toll rates are actually set. Next slide. One of the pieces we're going to need your help on as between now and September of next year is to understand how can we do an income-based toll rate. So that came up a lot in our VMT discussion we just had. And so we'll be bringing in the equity framework and applying that here, community engagement feedback, doing research on what other programs around the country have been doing to actualize this, to put it into place. And then as we just talked about before, we will have some information from the 205 toll project on rates and revenue impact that we'll be able to use to inform this. So that's one of the key pieces that's coming forward there on that. Next slide. Community feedback. So the last really, since this spring, you all weighed in on an equitable engagement plan. We've been hard at work since then, and we were actually starting to package up. It's a pretty sizable package of information on all the outreach we've heard and what are we specifically hearing from different equity framework communities. We've actually, as you were going through the different policy areas in transit and affordability and health and safety, we were taking questions out to the community on your recommendations. And so we're going to loop that back in. We'll have some of that information, we think, by December, but really next year, we'll be able to have a more robust package and information for you on the recommendations on those policy and strategy options that you were working on. And then Hannah is going to talk later in the meeting about a couple of engagement opportunities that are coming up in November that we would love to work with you on. Next slide. So here is, I think, really one of the most important things as far as next steps. And it's really, if we're following the equity framework steps, step 3, the determining of benefits and burdens, is a key place kind of where we're at with the toll program and these toll projects. Next slide. And so to really think through what does it mean to equitably determine benefits and burdens, we need to pause and think about, well, who's determining that? What's the information we're using it for? And so this is something that I know ODOT is working on, kind of their definition of equitable knowledge. This is a piece that I found that has been helpful in my past around from the data center. And it talks about how lived experience and cultural knowledge it can, in a new equitable way, can be put on par with what we get from the technical analysis and the professional community. And so that's where the community engagement work, the work with you all, we need to do more work to understand lived experience and cultural knowledge of the impacts, the benefits, and burdens of tolling. Next slide. One of the ways that you're going to see this information show up on the community engagement, on implementation and all that are in these equity fact sheets. And we started drafting them a couple of months ago because we thought we were going to try to get them ready for this meeting. And it's quite a task. We took each one of your policy and strategy options, which there were around 30, and we made a 2-pager, kind of a 1-page front and back on each one of those to understand how it addresses equity, what are the challenges and barriers, who is responsible for implementing, what's the timing, what's the cost. So that's just a lot of information. What we're going to try to push to get that to you maybe end of this year, but more likely early next year, to where we'll actually have enough information and it won't just be a lot of just kind of TBD on there, but know that that's coming to you. Next slide. And then going back to that equitable knowledge piece. So we talked about lived and cultural experience, but if you look at kind of what's the most traditional knowledge around analysis and kind of what we're going to see coming out of the projects, following the little lines you see here on the chart shows that we really will have to be into kind of late spring of next year before we start seeing that more a larger scale impacts analysis on the I-205 toll project. That will go out for kind of its official public comment. And then really by the end of 2022, ODOT's still working on revising that analysis, fine-tuning the toll rates that are assumed in the document, understanding or committing to additional mitigation. That happens really throughout 2022 on the I-205 toll project. And then the 2 gold bars that you see there are for the regional mobility pricing project. It's just early next year setting up what is the purpose and need, what are the goals, what are the alternatives for the study. But really we have to get into the middle of 2023 and towards the end of 2023 until you see that full length, the full package of benefits and burdens of impacts analysis and commitments for mitigation on that project as well. And so again, kind of going back to the comment I said earlier in the meeting, that's why we're committed to having Emac stay through 2024 so we can have a committee that then receives that information in the future when that's coming out. Next slide. So that's our plan for support. And as you can see there, it's going to take a little bit to get to some of that information, but we're going to try to bring it to you as soon as we can. So thank you. I'll turn it back over to Jessica.
Great. Thank you for that, Garrett. So with that understanding of what Garrett just walked us through, is there anything additional ODOT can do to support Emac in presenting to the OTC on November 18? Question number 1. And or what questions or feedback do you have on ODOT's plan to support? Is that a question, Bill?
No.
Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised, so I'm assuming that everybody is okay with where we're at with this information. Okay, great. Let's go to the next section of our meeting. So let's talk briefly about our December meeting. So instead of meeting during our usual time during the months of November and December, Emac will meet in early December to avoid the holidays. So during the December meeting, we will map out a revised Emac game plan for 2022. And then we'll also discuss what happened at the OTC meeting. And we're going to just follow up with everyone later and do a doodle poll to find out what the best timing might be for that early December meeting. Okay, and now let's have the toll projects and engagement update. Over to you, Hannah.
Thanks, Jessica. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm really humbled by the robust discussion so late at the end of the workday. Way to go. It was nice to listen to. Can I get the next slide, please? I'm going to give you a quick update. So this fall for the Regional Mobility Pricing Project, we are continuing early planning and inviting feedback. we're still gathering comments on the discussion draft purpose and need statement. And that's what really describes why the project is proposed and key issues the project will tackle. You've heard about the scuba team's feedback last month. And so the discussion draft is still open. So if you have any comments or anyone in your community wants to comment, please send them over to us as soon as possible, and certainly by mid-November, please. We'll also be developing congestion pricing concepts and policy options to meet the project purpose. And there'll be more to come on that at the next meeting, and we'll be sending out an email. For I-205, we are proceeding on the environmental analysis, and this includes traffic modeling. And all of this work will be published in the draft environmental assessment that Garrett mentioned in spring 2022. We've developed an engagement plan for this phase of the I-205 toll project, and we're looking for feedback on the inputs of the analysis. Early next year, we're going to be sharing the early outputs so that people aren't surprised when the environmental assessment comes out. The scuba team is in the process of taking a deep dive on these inputs for the environmental justice analysis, and we're also going to be working with Clackamas County staff to connect with communities, and this includes the county's Leaders for Equity, Diversion, and Inclusion Council. We're in the process of scheduling meetings to share information and gain input from local community organizations in winter of next year, and feedback from these communities will help with proposed mitigation strategies. So please reach out if you know any community groups that we should be reaching out to specifically. Can I get the next slide, please? All right, great, thanks. So we have a couple engagement opportunities that are coming up. The first one is on, well, actually these are switched. First one on your screen is the community-based organization discussion. And this is it's a 90-minute discussion, and we're paying participants. It's on the 17th of November from 5 to 6:30. And it's really for community-based organizations that are serving our equity framework communities. And the intent of this discussion is to really raise awareness and share information about UMO's, the Urban Mobility Office's key projects that includes the toll program. And then also have a conversation about ways that we can develop a successful and equitable tolling program, talk about your work, and then also talk about what's the best way to engage CBOs moving forward. We really want to acknowledge how busy everybody is. So I want to give a big thank you to all the Emac members that have helped me. We started sending out invitations this week, and I've gotten a lot of volunteers that are either helping sending invitations or doing follow-up. I've also gotten some help from Fabian. He's going to help us share information about your work at the discussion on the 17th. So thank you, thank you. And there's still more opportunities if you want to get involved in that. And then the second thing that's on there are the regional workshops. So that's for the Regional Mobility Pricing Project, and that is on November 9th and 10th. And we're really excited about it, and we hope that you'll be able to join us on one of the days. And so at this workshop, we'll have ODOT, hopefully you, Emac, elected officials, businesses, community leaders, and key agency staff. And we're going to be talking about congestion pricing in the Portland metro area. And we will have a topic that's focused on centering equity and talking about Emac and the equity framework. And we're really excited that Chris is going to facilitate that conversation, and we'll be joined by a few Emac members. So thank you again for volunteering for that. So this workshop will also have some breakout sessions, and members of the public will be able to watch it via live stream. And then we'll have a survey afterwards where members of the public can share their input that way. So just a little information on those two things that are coming up next month. Is there one more slide? Oh, great. Okay. Yeah, so here's a little snapshot of what we've been up to. I guess this is last month. been pretty busy. The comments are rolling in, whether it's voicemail or email or through a web form. People are visiting our website. We are getting some comments specifically on the purpose and need. We're out and about, we're doing briefings. This is a combination of government relation briefings, but also community-based organizations and business groups. We get our newsletter out there, committee meetings. We did an in-person tabling event. We went to Oregon City, so that was pretty nice. Outside, masked, socially distanced. And then we've been in the news. So that's just a quick little snapshot of what's happening when we don't have an Emac meeting. I think that's the last slide. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Hannah. You know what, just a minute. Does anyone have any questions for Hannah, especially about those engagement opportunities? If you do, just go ahead and unmute yourself or throw it in the chat.
If you haven't seen an invitation for the workshops, please let us know so we make sure it gets to you.
Hannah, should we just email you directly if we have a question or an interest?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks.
Okay.
Wonderful. Okay, well, let's do it. Let's go ahead and close the meeting. So our next steps are going to be the next Emac meeting is in December, and we'll reach out to you about a date for that meeting. And please complete your meeting evaluation. You know what? We do have 2 minutes. Does anyone have a closing thought? Any members want to just give us a closing thought for the meeting?
Should you call on someone who hasn't talked to us?
I know I should put someone on the spot,
I was thinking,
right?
I think you might want to do that.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Okay, I think I'm going to call on, how about John Gardner? There he is.
I knew you, I was just going to raise my hand, so that's so funny.
Beautiful.
No, I just want to echo what I forget whoever called in, but I agree. This is a ton of work. And I really appreciate the ability for the committee to do friendly amendments during the, and then for ODOT and the team to listen and incorporate that or work to incorporate that into the final product. So, I mean, I was just thinking about some of the processes we manage, and this has just been a really good process, and I look forward to it continuing. But just thank you, staff, and thank you for the members' willingness to continue to push the team to make sure all voices are heard. So just a good meeting overall. Thank you.
Thank you, John. That's an awesome closing thought. All right, you guys, what another amazing meeting with all of you brilliant minds. And thank you, Fabienne. I said, everybody have a great weekend. Excellent work. We'll be in touch.
Good to see y'all.
Thank you.
I think